Thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us today. I just understood it's part of a 3-day weekend, and I'm glad you were able to prioritize joining us. Hello and welcome. I'm honored to be here, and I want to thank Dr. Lori Thompson from the Capital STEM Alliance and Cheryl Haywood from Timberland Library for their leadership in pulling us all together. I'm Shelley Willis, Executive Director of Family Education and Support Services. 23 years ago, our community asked for consistent parent education and support. And a small group of like-minded people listened, came together, and launched what is now known as Family Education and Support Services, or sometimes FES. We started with a staff of 3 people in a tiny office, a vision, and a whole lot of hope. That first year, we served about 150 families, and we were guided by the belief that it costs more to fix broken adults than it does to raise healthy kids. This past year, we served over 20,000 individuals from 3 locations, Thurston, Mason, and Lewis counties. And those numbers are not statistics to us, because behind every one is a son, a daughter, a mother, a father, a sister, or a grandparent. It's the kinship caregiver who walked into our office carrying an infant with a broken leg, wrapped in a paper towel, and asking for diapers. It's the dad that didn't even know he was a dad until he had a phone call from Child Protective Services and is now seeking fatherhood training. It's the mom navigating recovery who's pregnant and seeking to move into a safer location. And it's the parents who call us for help because their child's been kicked out of school or childcare again, and they just don't know what to do. It's also the McKinney-Vento school counselor asking us to collaborate in sustaining housing for a family. Members come to reach out to us at FES for a variety of reasons. What remains consistent is the total goal of promoting child health and well-being. Oops, lost my notes now. We recognize how crucial it is to acknowledge and address the psychosocial challenges that many students are facing today. Education isn't just about what happens in the classroom, it's a community effort, and we're consistently assessing if we are on the right track. Successful school engagement, poverty, trauma, and other factors all contribute to academic success. Building connections between schools and community resources can create stronger support and a network for students and families to succeed. There is no doubt that the COVID-19 pandemic era ushered in a new set of challenges for youth across the United States. The CDC reported that during the pandemic, 29% of high school students had a parent or a caregiver who lost their job. 55% were emotionally abused by a parent or a caregiver, and 11% were physically abused. Some children left the family home to go live with a caregiver. Other families moved out of the district, and some chose alternative schooling options. Whatever happened, there's no doubt that many children experienced an increase in isolation and academic disruption. Just over a year ago, the United States Surgeon General declared mental health as a crisis. However, if you look back at the Healthy Youth Survey and the CDC reports, you'll see that youth were showing increased amounts of sadness and feelings of hopelessness and suicidal ideation as far back as 2009. All of these difficulties, on top of growing concerns about social media, mass violence, natural disasters, climate change, and political polarization, not to mention the normal ups and downs of childhood and adolescence, can feel insurmountable for kids and for those who work with them. The idea of a mental health crisis is really broad, and for providers and parents, the term can be anxiety-provoking. However, we're ahead of the game. First of all, you're all here. Second, we have an idea of what works. We know promoting resilience can make a difference, and there's science behind our strategies. Today is about bringing our community together to explore meaningful conversations about what strategies can we take to turn the tides. I thank you for joining us today. I look forward to listening with curiosity as we discuss moving forward together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shelley. Appreciate that. Okay, now we will introduce our panelists again. Okay, so our panelists are Scott Hanauer from Family Education and Support Services, Lee Montgomery from Lewis County Juvenile Justice Department, Danette Molina and Cassandra Gerlich, both from ESD 113, and Kayla Brinkmeyer from Big Brothers Big Sisters. And to start us off, Cheryl, did you want to ask a question, or do you want me to just go ahead and start?
Just go ahead and start, Lori.
Okay, no worries. Right. Okay, so the first question is for Lee. Can you tell us why are mental health conditions of so many teenagers such a huge concern today? And what data do you have that supports this statement?
Sure. Thanks, Lori. Thanks for having me on here. I'm really excited to be here and just to share the information I have. I started in this field of juvenile justice in 1996. So I've got 27 years and I've just seen the changes over the years. Mental health has definitely moved up to the top of our concern in recent years. We just see this huge change in kids and what they're dealing with, their struggle. And because of those mental health struggles, we just see the hope, dreams just disappear, and their desire to be engaged in any kind of schooling or educational system just disappear as well. Now I want to throw out a few stats here just to kind of give you an idea. The 2021 Healthy Youth Survey for Lewis County showed roughly 1/3 of 8th and 10th graders reported feeling so sad or hopeless in the previous 12 months that they stopped participating in usual activities. Didn't want to go to school, didn't want to do anything. 1/4 of the 6th graders said that they had seriously considered killing themselves. And that's a really alarming statistic. In the juvenile justice realm, those are just general school students there. And in the juvenile justice system, we also do assessments as kids are coming through. And here's some of the statistics that we found. 14.5% of the kids that we deal with have attempted suicide at least once. That's just really scary. 50% or more are currently using drugs or alcohol. 79% were highly unlikely to graduate. Most of them didn't have any kind of pro-social adult involved in their life. And so just the mental health struggles that they have. We just received a recent one as of just 2 weeks ago, and it has, 43% have thought about suicide. 1 in 5 have engaged in self-mutilating behavior. 53% have mental health problems, not counting ADHD or depression. 50% come from homes with verbal intimidation. 42% report being a victim of physical violence and abuse. So you just imagine the trauma and the things that kids are dealing with and just trying to survive. And so if we go back to the school system here of focusing on Maslow over Bloom's, imagine the amount of kids that are coming and trying to learn, and they're just trying to survive. They haven't even considered trying to learn and trying to be who they are, but they're just trying to make it day to day. And so these mental health conditions that are coming up, trauma and diagnosis, and this has really been shown from the restrictions and the fear that came from COVID, how these really came out. We saw that so much more. I mean, they were there. We just saw it come out. Just the concern of the mental health going on. And in the juvenile justice system, it's just amazing the amount of kids that come through that are really involved with us because of mental health. Really should be involved with something else, but they come to us because they've committed a crime. The good side of that is that they're getting some services now because of that. And so, yeah, the concern with the mental health is just gigantic. And you can see that why it's drained their desire to be engaged in school.
Wow, those are some frightening statistics, Lee. Oh my goodness. Did you said something about the age, about 14% of youth who are oh my gosh, who are becoming alcoholics. What ages did that include?
That includes 12 to 17-year-old.
Oh my goodness, that's young. Wow. So what are some of the possible services that you might be able to offer that would target these youth that are struggling, and maybe their families even, before they get involved in the whole court system?
Right. Yeah. So we have two different realms here. One is prevention. That's focusing on kids and families before they get involved in the juvenile justice system. The other one would be those that are already or get involved with the juvenile justice system, and kind of two different services there, just because of the needs factors there. And so we have a couple different ones for preventative. on the preventative side. If they come through even just DCYF, they can get functional family therapy through them. And that's our counselors that come with a specific program into the home or wherever the home family wants to meet and addresses the needs of the whole family and kind of puts them on a road. It really focuses on relationships and that type of thing. For us, particularly in our court, we have a new program, our mentorship program, similar to Big Brothers Big Sisters in Lewis County here. We reach across the whole county, focusing on 12 to 17-year-olds, and those are for any youth in our county that don't have the support at home. They don't have a supportive parents, grandparents, any family that's around. They're not involved in things in the community, sports, music, theater. They're not involved in any kind of clubs or anything that they have that support. And so they're just kind of withdrawn into themselves. You imagine those kids that deal with trauma or deal with other mental health issues, what that really does for them when they're so isolated like that. And so we began this mentorship program. We've been going with that since June. It's doing really well, growing continually. And so we're excited about that. We have a couple other programs too. We have what we call our early prevention and empowerment program. And that one's kind of like professional advocators here. We're in the realm here where we're holding them our hand, helping them to get appointments, because many of them don't even have the skills to know how to make a dental appointment or make a doctor's appointment, or how to find a service out there or even know what's out there. And so we're just kind of being an advocate for them and helping them do that. And then we also have another program here that we do is called pro-social outings. And this again is for students across the county here that don't have those supports involved in their life. And those pro-social outings involve just going out into nature, into our great resources here in the Northwest, and as a group, and letting them experience some of those while having positive pro-social adults for the day around them. So we've taken kids on hikes to waterfalls, mountain bike rides. We've taken them kayaking and fishing, taken them on ropes courses. We went up to a couple of Rainiers baseball games. We actually took a group up to the Seahawks training camp. We've just done a ton of, taken them to the zoo, just taken a lot of things. We actually took a group of girls down to the beach. And what's surprising is most of the kids, I would say 98% of the kids that come on these outings have never been to any of these. Their families don't go on vacation. They don't go to outings. They don't go anywhere, even to a local park. They just don't do those. And so it's always exciting for the kids. And just to see the transformation from the first minute when they arrive to when we bring them back at the end of the day is just phenomenal. It's so encouraging. And it's just really fun to be a part of that. And so we have people in the community that we've vetted to come be mentors for the day, and as well as our staff go on these. And so it's just a really fun outing opportunity to do that. And it's a way that we can address some of the mental health issues that are going on. And that's kind of on the preventative side. So Lori, if I can go to the next side here, which would be on the intervention side, and that would be with the kids that are involved in our juvenile justice system in some way. We've got a number of programs there. We have, like I said, mentioned the functional family therapy, which is really beneficial. It's been shown to make a huge impact on families. We also have an employment training program, and this is one that I particularly am involved in providing employment training to kids that are looking for work. We're trying to get them to look for work because there's a high correlation of those that are working and staying out of trouble, to learn how to write resumes and do interviews and that type of thing. We also have a class called Coordination of Services. And this is for kids that are, when they first come into our system, so they're not deeply involved in our system, but at first come in. And it's a class that we run over a weekend for about 12 hours, and it involves a parent and the youth. And they come and we teach them some life skills classes, or life skills there. And so that's really great. We also have an individualized treatment court. So kids that are involved in our court system, and there's a very specific issue that's involved in their life that's affecting them, then we can put them in to the specialized court, and it really targets that. It's quite involved in the family, involved in the family's lives, and it really targets specific issues that are in their life there. So we have some great programs to make a difference there, hopefully to reduce the mental health things, the trauma things that are going on that are keeping them from being engaged in the educational system.
Wow, yeah, that's quite a bit. I took note of a few phrases that you used. One was advocate. So
Yes.
we're looking at adults to be advocates for our youth who are suffering from stress and depression and anxiety and lack of engagement. mentorship. You mentioned that phrase. And then you also said pro-social adults, all of whom I think you made a great case for saying how essential these people are in a young person's life in order to keep them from heading down the wrong path. So
Yes.
I wrote those down because those are really important.
Yes.
And thank you for mentioning Big Brothers Big Sisters. I'd like to go to Kayla right now and ask her, because I'd like to see how that compares, and see what some of the programs that they have are similar to the ones that you have. So Kayla, what resources does Big Brothers Big Sisters offer for young people in our region?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Thank you, Lee. All the stuff you said was really cool. A few of the programs we offer, of course, the big thing of Big Brothers Big Sisters is we're all about one-to-one mentorship for our youth, whether it's in our community-based program where the adult volunteer and the youth get to go out and do things like go to the park. We've had littles we've gotten tickets to the ballet, and a lot of littles have never gotten to go before. So that's been a really great experience. Or I have another match who he's never been fishing prior to getting matched with his big, and now they love it. They go every single week. It's insane. They have so much fish. We also offer site-based programs, meeting kids where they are. Our community-based program asks a lot of the family, but our site-based program gives the opportunity to youth who don't have a lot of family involvement, where they can meet at their school or a YMCA or a Boys and Girls Club, and still get the chance to have one-to-one mentorship opportunity. We also offer a career mentoring program, where we have an adult volunteer in a particular career mentor high school youth and help them understand more about it. They usually have a really great project for the school year. We worked with Thomas Architecture Studios in downtown Olympia, and they were remodeling a local theater, and the kids got to actually help with the remodel and the designing of it all, which was really cool, because now once how construction works, it takes forever. One day they'll get to actually see all their work in person and get to say, wow, I got to help with that. So I think the biggest thing about what we offer is helping those kids ignite their potential and find that potential, and not just, tell them, okay, now you have to do this, you have to go to college, or you have to, do this next, helping meet them where they are and find what's important to them.
Great, thank you. You've both mentioned, you and Lee both mentioned the fact that that adults are present in a student's life or young person's life, and that they take them on outings to places that maybe they'd never gone before, never even heard of before. So what's the significance of having an adult in a young person's life, ushering them into a social situation?
I think something that we think a lot about with student engagement and everything is external factors, whether it's family or peers or culture, and not everyone has that access to those things, or an adult that they can model themselves after or want to model themselves after, and having mentoring helps provide that for a youth. And even if it's someone you get to talk to that's not your parent or guardian, where you want to tell things to and explore things that you wouldn't normally with a parent.
Thank you. What would make, just off the top of my head, could you tell us a little bit about what would make a good mentor? How would you know if you're a good candidate to be a mentor?
That's a great question. It's always hard to say, but my biggest thing is if you want to be a mentor, you're already ahead of the game. We're not picky always. We do, you have to go through extensive background checks, and but I think that wanting to meet a child where they're at is really important, and not trying to come in with a savior complex. We want to help the youth, not do it for them, essentially. And I think that knowing that you're willing to do that or even take time out of your day. You know, it's only 4 to 6 hours a month. I always say that people watch more TV than that in like a day. So already doing that makes you a great candidate. I'm
That's
sure Lee
awesome.
also has some.
Pardon?
qualities.
No, that's awesome, because I think a lot of people might think, oh, I wouldn't make a great candidate for a mentor. But I think that if people dig down deep and they just care, that's a great place to start, at least. And would you recommend that anyone who wants to be a mentor get in touch with you and go through the process?
Absolutely. I think exactly like you're saying, Lori, anyone who's willing to dig deep, you don't have to be the perfect person. You're going to be great. You know, especially if you have more to your background than what's, you know, traditional. It helps even more to show a youth that, look, I made it. I did it. You can do it too. I always talk about, so I was actually a little for 10 years in the program. And I am from a family with a single mother, first generation. And my mom worked super hard, 4 jobs. So she didn't have the time. And I had a really great big sister. I actually just got married a couple months ago, and my big sister came to my wedding. So I think it's really important, you know, if you have the time, do it. Please. We need it, especially males. Our male wait list is 2 years long for our littles. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Kayla, could you talk about where Big Brothers and Big Sisters, because you mentioned Olympia, and for our listeners who are here today and into the future who are going to watch this later on, could you just mention where you serve?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm with Big Brothers Big Sisters of Southwest Washington. So we serve Thurston County, Lewis County, Mason County, Pacific County, and Grays Harbor. If you are looking at a different part of Washington, we do have Big Brothers Big Sisters of Puget Sound, of Spokane. We have lots of options to get you to the right Big Brothers Big Sisters, and I'll put my info in the chat if you're interested.
That would be great. Great question, Cheryl. Thank you so much. Wow, what inspiring stories from both of you. It's giving us hope. Thank you so much. I'd like to turn to Scott from Family Education and Support Services and kind of go back to what causes some of the stressors for not just students in the post-COVID era, but for their families. I mean, does this just suddenly happen, or is this something that maybe has been maybe there'd been a stressor all along, but COVID made it worse, and then it's hard to recover afterwards? What does that trajectory look like?
Sure. I'm glad to follow Lee and Kayla because in a lot of ways, because some of the research that we've been doing at FAST and at the University of Washington is to study how those kinds of programs, mentorship programs, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, getting kids involved in pro-social activities, actually change the molecular structure of kids' brains in a positive sort of way. So it's not just doing nice things with kids. It is, really literally changing their neurobiology. So stress, we all deal with stress. I think, we've all read and heard about the impact of COVID, on our world and our society. I read a study recently that said the impact of COVID is going to be 3 generations, that it'll take that long for the world to recover, from a number of different reasons. We also have recognized that time is a stressor for parents, it's a stressor for kids, and it's a stressor for educators. Things have to be done in a regimented kind of way. So there's a lot of drivers for stress. Some of the work that we've been doing at FAST in a partnership with the University of Washington is not so much focusing on what causes, stressors in people's lives, but what we can do to mitigate. Everybody's probably heard of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. As a clinician, I was trained many years, decades ago, to talk to kids about their ACEs, that somehow if we asked them about the who, what, when, and where of their trauma, that somehow that was going to be helpful to them. What we know now is that's absolutely not true. That actually causes more harm in most cases for kids. So what we've shifted to is what's the antidote to ACEs? The antidote to ACEs is what we call positive childhood experiences. And there's numbers of them, but what Kayla and Lee have talked about are those many of those positive childhood experiences when kids have the opportunity to do pro-social activities, when they're connected. What research tells us is that kids who have higher resiliency have at least two non-parental adults in their lives who unconditionally believe in them and unconditionally accept them. Now, for most families, those two non-parental adults are like, grandmas and grandpas, aunts and uncles, but not everybody's a traditional family, right? So we still need to find those two non-parental adults. So positive childhood experiences are protective factors. And what Big Brothers is doing and what Lee's programs, as he's identified them, are meeting that. One of the programs I was fortunate enough to be a part of at the beginning was the Bridge Music Project that has a remarkable impact. I don't know, Lee, has the Bridge been in your facilities? I think he has, right? I think they've been down there.
We've had contact. There's no program going here at the
Okay.
moment. Yeah.
So as a therapist, I can emphatically say that pro-social activity where kids learn to write their own music, they go to a studio and produce it, and then they perform it publicly, has a more therapeutic impact on kids than most therapies. And that's just another example of what Kayla and Lee were talking about. We also know that a positive childhood experiences is when they have at least one adult, or more than one is better, but who can look for that kid's spark. Every kid has a spark. Every kid has a passion and interest that if an adult, helps them pursue that sparks. Even toddlers have sparks, right? Sparks for toddlers are, princesses or bugs or, rocks or dinosaurs. As kids get older, sparks tend to fall into different categories. When they have when kids have at least one significant adult in their life who helps them pursue their spark, knowing that sparks are going to change as kids go through developmental stages. When they have that adult that goes with them, their resiliency goes up. So our work, has really been on not so much stressing about what causes trauma and stressors in people's life, but what we can do to mitigate it. And I have to say that what Lee and Kayla talked about are exactly what our community needs.
Thank you, Scott. I noticed that you said the word resiliency, and that's something that Shelley had mentioned in her keynote. Shelley, do you have anything that you wanted to say additional to resiliency? Because I know you and Scott are both heavily invested in this. Either one of you, about resiliency. What are some of the factors that can lead to resiliency or develop resiliency?
Scott is really the expert here, so I'm going to defer to him.
I don't know about that. How we've kind of defined resiliency and, in our research and our work at FEST is resiliency is defined, and we've looked at resiliency, how is it defined across other societies and other cultures? And not so surprisingly, resiliency is pretty much defined the same way. And it's one's ability to persevere through challenges, one's ability to be flexible, to bounce back, to overcome obstacles. So we want to build resiliency in kids, and how we do that is through positive childhood experiences, having mentors, having pro-social activities, have an adult in their life who helps those youth pursue their sparks, their interests, their activities. I'm also a big believer that sparks set a path for kids' lives, and especially if they're doing a spark with a significant adult in their life. And there's tons of examples of that, but sparks could be a certain subject in school, or a spark could be a sport, or it could be music. And when they have a significant adult in their life who helps them pursue that spark, it can set a path for kids' lives.
Can I just add too that studies show that public libraries are a form of resiliency because of the what you were just saying, Scott, around interests and sparks and positive environment, etc.
Yes.
And that also contributes to that pro-social behavior that you were all talking so much about, is not just spending time together, but spending time together in an activity that encourages socialization, positive socialization. So,
I know I just want to say one more thing. I know there's people on this panel from ESD, and I'm not an expert about education, but I think as a society, what we need to do is to figure out how do we build resiliency in teachers and school administrators and, direct service staff, because they're coming out of COVID, where, being an educator is a whole different ball game than it was before COVID in a whole bunch of different ways. And I read a study recently that there was a school district that did a survey of their employees, and one of the questions in the survey was how many of them saw themselves in education for the next 5 years. Less than 50% said yes. And that wasn't true before COVID. So what can we do as a community to build resilience in schools?
that's a very good point, because those young people today are the future teachers of tomorrow. So we need to do everything we can to support them. Good point. And I'm glad you brought up ESD 113, Scott, because I'd like to direct our next couple of questions to Cassandra and Danette, who are both from ESD 113 and student supports. And this is, either one of you jump in, finish each other's sentences, that would be fine. Scott brought up a really good point. We were interested in student disengagement, but at some point I'd like you to think about what are some of the reasons for adult disengagement, and how does that transfer over to student disengagement, if at all. But let's start with students. So what are some of the top reasons for student disengagement that you have seen? Either of you.
I can speak to that. I think it's important to really give a clear picture of where this information that I'm about to share came from. We're not a business. The work that I do is it's grant work. So this is very different. It's not just available to anyone. But I'm a student support coordinator that's working on an attendance and re-engagement grant that was born out of COVID. It was funding that was provided to help schools get back on track with locating students that were unenrolled and nobody really knew where they were. It was funding that was to provide extra hands for partnering with the students who were experiencing the highest amount of absences. So the grant was in response to basically a pandemic level of chronic absenteeism. And then it's also important to note that, so not everybody's clear what chronic absenteeism means. So chronic absenteeism is defined as missing 10% of school or more in a school year. So that's just 18 days because the school years are 180 days. So if you break that down, that's just about 2 days a month. And it's important to note that that includes excused absences and unexcused. I think a lot of our minds go to unexcused absences, but so that's what chronic absenteeism is. And what our program did through this grant is provided districts either directly with funding to hire their own specialists who would locate those unenrolled students and encourage them to re-enroll, and to connect with students and provide tier 3 case management to the students who were experiencing the highest level of chronic absenteeism. So some districts received those funds directly and were able to hire their own specialists. But then the ESDs across Washington State also received funding, and we hired specialists directly to go into the smaller districts. So my program works with 6 different school districts in Mason and Grace Harbor County, and 10 schools total. And last year, it's also important to highlight that this is a grant it was a 3-year grant and we're in year 3. And I don't know if anybody's ever done grant work, but if by year 3, you're just figuring out what the heck it is that you're doing, right? So you've caught me at a kind of like, you say expert, I say expert in learning. But the results from last year, so we had one full solid year of data to go from, and that was from the 2022-2023 school year. And through conversations with these students that we were re-engaging, we had them tell us about why they disengaged. And there were lots of reasons, but the top 4 most reported reasons were that they were sick, or they were dealing with physical or mental health issues. And I would almost say that those mental health issues were more on the heavy side. They also reported not having the support they needed to succeed in their schoolwork. So getting behind and then feeling anxious and overwhelmed and not knowing how to get caught back up. So it's easier to disengage instead of moving forward, because reading skills, math skills dramatically decreased. Another was not feeling welcomed or comfortable at school, not having connections with adults, not having connections with peers. And last but not least is having students reporting having a home or family situation that made it difficult to attend school. And so those were the most reported reasons from those most chronically absent students, or students who had completely unenrolled and disengaged.
Was there any disaggregation regarding maybe students who had disabilities, or is this just the aggregate numbers?
Yeah, so if I would have been more prepared, I would have come with,
I'm so sorry.
lots of different numbers.
I was
but
just
yes,
a follow-up question. I
No,
guess
it's a good question. So yeah, so the data was broken down in this first round. This is the interim results, was looking at the different ethnicities and races. We have a high population of Hispanic population and also Indigenous youth. So we do see that there's a lot of disparities in those people groups. Definitely.
So in other words, the ones that were already anxious, stressed, experiencing those issues are going to have it.
And coming out of COVID made that
right
1,000 times worse.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. That's that's very upsetting. Can you just really describe, just really quickly, for those who don't know, what Tier 3 services are?
Yeah, so in education, there's a beautiful triangle, and it's divided into 3 layers, and it's Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. And really, everybody in the whole school receives Tier 1 services. These are proactive and preventative services that support education and regular attendance. Everybody gets them. That should make up about 80 to 85% of the school. Then you have a smaller amount of students that are in Tier 2 that are having issues that require more support. So they get more specialized support. Maybe they go to a small group or something like that. And then you've got Tier 3, which is really supposed to be reserved for about 5% of the school population. And those would be the most struggling academic, like the students who are struggling most academically, the students who are struggling most with their attendance. It's only supposed to hold about 5% of the students. But right now, we've got schools that their Tier 3 is flooded and their triangles kind of flipped upside down. We've got schools that have, 30-40% of their school population is chronically absent. So a lot of the work that we're trying to do is to go upstream and do more preventative and foundational work while still addressing Tier 3. But we really need to move back and start addressing some of this from a foundational level, instead of putting holes or putting our fingers in all the holes that are leaking, going and fixing the root, which Scott and Kayla and Lee all talked about, connection, relationships, belonging. It's all very entwined in that. A lot of it is.
I would be curious to see the diagram of all the school districts with their inverted triangles. I mean, and then compare them from pre-COVID, just to see what the percentage is and how much that's shifted from tier 3 being at the top to being at the very bottom. Just be curious to see something like that. Thank you. That's good information. Danette, do you have anything that you'd like to add about our the students that you particularly work with and some of the issues that you've been seeing?
Yes, so the students that I work with primarily are youth that have been in the JR system, releasing, transitioning to their local communities. So basically my position, I'm a education advocate coordinator. I work with the education advocate program here at ESD 113, and my position covers all 5 regions. As long as the youth was in JR release into any of the counties in our region, I will serve them. How that works, I received a referral from either Green Hill, Echo Glen, any of the living facilities that are in our regions as well, or even across Washington State. If they're releasing into our region, I get a referral for that. My other education advocate in the team, we have a very small team, and that will be Donna. She basically serves the students in Thurston County, and those students are students that are at risk currently in school, either about to be disengaging, or basically they get referrals through school counselors, parents, principals, community-based organizations, anyone that's working with a youth that they feel that the youth could that the youth could use more support other than the one that they already have by the person that's referring them. Is a youth that we will actually provide services for. I'm doing the same thing in Lewis County now with the schools in Lewis County, providing that support at the school level, trying to reach the youth that are at risk. Again, something that Lee was saying, the preventive services or the preventive work, trying to reach them before they get to the system. Primarily the program is built to serve the youth that are already in the system. However, it just doesn't make no sense to wait for for them to get to that point in their lives, which could be very much more detrimental than what they may be already experiencing to receive services. So that is the objective of the program in itself. And what does that look like for me when I receive a case either from the school or from a JR facility? It differs very much. Every one of them have many types of barriers that comes with IEPs, that comes with substance disorders, that comes with mental health, that comes with family dysfunction, and unfortunately they're releasing to that same environment. That comes with so many barriers that have to navigate through them. I basically meet with these youth and try to assess what it is that they're working with or what they're up against. I reach out to the schools that they are supposed to be engaging with again in their communities and help the parent, whether the parent is already doing the work or they may need some advocacy in the sense of connecting to the right person. They may not be able to get the student enrolled right away for whatever reason from their previous charge. It was an act that they did in school, whatever it may be. The problem that the youth finds in those situations is that the district doesn't want them back into the school. So that's when I come in and I speak to the people that I need to speak to, whether that's the superintendent, the principal, assistant principal, school counselors, bring a team together and let's have a discussion on how is it that we could get this kid back into school. If the issue is about previous either threat or previous behavior that everyone is worried about, let's have the discussion. Let's put a safety plan in place. Let's put a plan in place altogether as to allow the student to integrate back into into the school environment, because it's not just academically, socially as well, for the mental health, development, the social development, and especially the ones that's coming out of incarceration. They do come with a lot of social barriers. Just being incarcerated, it's a traumatizing experience in itself, where one always got to look over their shoulders. So going back into society, they're constantly looking over their shoulders. So they come with a lot of challenges. And as I mentioned, it's a case by case situation. A lot of the things that I get back, part of the assessments that we make is asking, what do you think about school, the previous school you was in? What do you think about the staff? What do you think about the environment? And what we get is primarily a lot from what Cassandra mentioned, not enough support in the school through connection, through relationship building with the staff themselves, the teachers. There is kids that could identify from LGBTQ. However, it's very disappointing to some degree, because the things I hear is just like, why are we still here doing this or hearing this, that the individuals that's supposed to be protecting the students from other students, they're not, they're being bullied, they're being targeted. And unfortunately, I've heard that teachers do the same. So when I come across those cases, I feel we need to advocate for them. Call out the teacher, bring it to the attention of the principal, bring it to the attention of the district, bring it to the forefront of what's going on. These kids are dealing with a lot within their own peers and at home. Enough support is not there to address the situations and the worries and concerns they have themselves. They are not being listened to. And that comes with disengaging. They don't want to attend school. They don't want to attend a classroom that a person that they want to interact with, it's in 2 of their 6 classes a day. So they may miss 2 classes every single day because they just don't want to deal with the person that's in that classroom, and the teacher is aware of the situation and they're not doing anything about it.
This speaks to directly what Scott was saying before about not only addressing the stressors of our students, but addressing takes a village approach. We need to address the stressors in the family, in the friends, and everyone along the line that interacts with those students, because it's like putting it, like you said, who just said that? Cassandra. It's like putting your finger in a hole or putting a Band-Aid on something, and it just doesn't address the entire problem. It's just a symptom.
Exactly.
So you are 100% right. I have a question. What would happen if you're working really hard with a student, and that student decides to become disengaged from the school and they drop out? What do the services stop, or do you track the student?
No, the services doesn't stop. The services stop when the student wants the services to stop.
Okay. Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah. And as long as they're within that age group, which we serve them until they're 21.
Okay.
So if they disengage, is basically trying to stay in contact with them outside of school. The objective is to keep them engaged, but things happen. They basically disengage on their own, whether they have a parent that's trying to push them in that direction or don't have the parent. It happens either way. And it's not just about the student, it's also providing the parent the support that they need. Sometimes they don't know how to deal with their own child, and it's helping them navigate through the multi-systems that's that we have available to help them find the right resource that could support the family. The one that serves our county in Thurston County that has been doing a marvelous job with their services, as we all know, is the WISE program. Unfortunately, it's the resource there. It's great, but it's very limited. There's so many families today that need those services, and it's not just an individual service, it's family trauma that they need.
And you brought up an important point, sorry to interrupt you, because those wraparound intensive services are what is the answer. I'm not the answer, but it's a step in the right direction. Sounds like you need, as most of those here do, you need to be connected well with a lot of different agencies and organizations that provide those specific supports to students,
Constantly.
to families, etc.
Exactly, constantly. If it's not the WISE, it's also True North. There's a lot of youth that get released with substance abuse issues, and they've been somewhat clean while they've been incarcerated. However, once they come out, it's that environment, it's all they know. So just being connected to someone that's going to help them to stay on track and stay clean and stay focused, it's also a challenge in itself. So,
well, thank you for sharing that. We're going to take a very quick 5-minute break so people can get a drink of water. And then we'll be right back at 5:35. And at that point, we'll ask anyone from our audience to come up with any questions, or if you have an issue that you'd like to discuss or get some advice or recommendations. Our panelists will be around, as will Shelley and Cheryl. And we just take a couple minutes and then come right back. Everyone, we'll go ahead and get started with the recording again. Thank you again, Chris, for being our moderator here. Really appreciate that. I want to also thank all of our panelists. You had some amazing information. I've been taking notes furiously for everything you've said, as I'm sure Cheryl has. We'd like to open it up to the participants here. If you have any questions, or you need recommendations, or there's an issue you'd like to bring up, feel free to just popcorn. Don't be shy. On the other side of that, if any one of our panelists would like to jump in, and if you have any events coming up or resources or programs that you'd like to share, this would be a great forum to do that.
So I actually, I love that I saw this yesterday, because I am working with a friend of mine who is an artist and a child advocate in court, and she has been being a reading buddy and has had some amazing results at helping some of the most disruptive kids to actually start to learn and start to become little leaders in the elementary school. And both of us are Rotarians, and I'm a Rotarian out in Bonnie Lake. And so we've got the 5th grade classroom has at least 75% of the kids have traumatic situations at home. And so they're like, it's so bad, and they're all like acting like kindergartners. They're really not acting like 5th graders. And so we're talking about adopting the whole classroom, and be able to have essentially some of our Rotarians start to be that positive adult in these kids' lives, to be able to help turn things around. And Teresa and I are creating a program to train teachers and volunteers on some of the tools that can help make a difference for these kids with art and with tools for helping them self-regulate and stuff. And so I have, like, this is a world that I have not ever known how to connect with the right people. And when I dropped in on this meeting, it's like, oh my God, all of these people are people that I should connect with, because I think being able to know how to get to the right people who actually care about helping these kids deal with the amount of stress that they are facing. I think it's really important. And so I wanted to know, like, what is the best way to connect with the right people to get our pilot going.
I'll just throw it out there to the group.
Robin, I love that that you are bringing up this idea of going in and partnering with an entire class. I know that one of the things that schools really lack right now is capacity, staff, time. The pandemic, the attendance pandemic has really created another layer of stress for the teachers who are already stressed. And so when we talk about all of the things that we could do to make it better, about half the time the response from teachers and staff is overwhelmed, because it's like, how can we do that when we already have all of these other things that we need to do? And so one of the things that I've been talking with a lot of the schools about is bringing in members of the community and partnering with the community. There's a lot of people out there who really want to volunteer their time or their expertise, and it's just about connecting. So I would say that if you wanted to send me your information, or I could send you my information, and I could continue that conversation with you. That one of the ideas in one of our schools is there's a tardy problem, and actually that's pretty rampant everywhere. But this particular school doesn't open until 5 minutes before the first bell rings, because they just don't have the staff to keep the school doors open, and then a large part of that population of that school reports that they desire connection. And so one of the ideas is actually partnering with the local tribe and having their volunteers come in about 20 minutes before school starts, opening the doors, allowing kids to come in and have arts and crafts time, space to connect, and that is just a really great example of how a volunteer can make a huge difference in a school potentially. So I love your thinking. I think that you're not going to find when you offer your help, you might be surprised how many people are eager to receive it, especially from the schools.
Well, one of the things that we think is that training the volunteers, giving them good ways to deal with what they're going to be facing. Because Teresa was, when the principal of the elementary school on the backside of her house talked to her Rotary Club, and she was appalled that she was the only one who signed up to be a reading buddy out of the whole Rotary Club. But we think if they get some training so that they're not going into the situation of, working with traumatized kids when they don't have a clue of what to do, that's setting them up for failure, right? And so being able to give them tools of how they can quickly develop rapport and work with these kids and hold space for them in a positive way is going to make a big difference, I think, in getting volunteers.
So if any of our, I know most of our community organizations in our region do rely on some level of volunteerism and will provide training. So if there's anyone here who is interested, you could put your name and email address in the chat. Robin, if you want to put your email address in the chat, I'm happy to connect you with anybody. If you tell me exactly what you'd like, I have lots of contacts, and so do all the folks on this call.
Okay, I did put my contact information in the chat.
Perfect.
I noticed that I am not being able to copy and paste the chat into my notes.
Okay,
And
that's,
I don't think I can save it either.
I'm gonna put Chris on that. I don't know why that is.
I can send you the chat transcript as well if you message me your email address.
Sure. We'll get you connected. That's
Oh,
what,
you
that's,
already got it in there. I see.
okay. That's what we do at the ESD, all of us, and the Capital STEM Alliance. We are connectors. So we reach out to all 5 counties and stay in close contact with many community-based organizations. And we're pretty well invested in making connections to others outside of our region as well. So we're all here to help. I know all the folks on this call are here to help. And we all have capacity, you know, in various degrees, but we're all here to help.
Robin, I'll get in touch with you as well. We have a site-based program that's at schools, exactly what you're wanting to do. So I can get over our curriculum for you at least, and some of our training resources that we offer our volunteers as well.
Awesome.
Okay. Any other questions?
Robin, you said that you were at Bonnie Lake, right? You were talking about a school in Bonnie Lake?
Well, the school that I'm working with is in Bonnie Lake, and then Teresa has been working with LP Brown over in West Olympia.
Okay.
And right now I'm sitting in Olympia. So I spend about half my time in Olympia and half the time out in the Buckley Bonnie Lake area.
Okay.
Okay. Would any of our panelists like to weigh in on a specific topic or something you'd like our audience to really know about? I love data. If you want to give us more data, I would love to hear it. Data really shows you where the gaps are, right? And it shows you where you need to really put your resources to move the needle. So I was just wondering if anyone has some data that they'd like to share, especially around this topic.
So I'll share something that my friend who's a retired child psychologist, one of the things that he brought up was that girls age 15 to 21 have their rate of suicide is what did he say? I think it was 84%. I can't swear to that part, compared to only like 14 or 16% for the boys in that age range. And then another statistic was that the 15 to 21-year-old girls also 60% of them experience sadness and hopelessness. And so that is a very good combination for suicide.
Was it Lee or Scott? Did you want to address that?
I have heard similar statistics like that as well, where the amount of the girls was significantly higher than the boys, especially coming out of COVID. That seemed to be, I don't know, just exacerbated everything. So it was really extreme. And I don't know what services have been put into the school system, particularly to address that. I'm sure that there's some there. But yeah, that's very, very concerning. I know there's a lot of stats out there, Lori, that show a lot of, concern for the trauma that's gone on. And I guess, Robin, I'd like to refer you, I'm stretched as thin as I could go. Otherwise, I would offer something there myself, but I'm about as stretched as I can go. I took a lot of my trainings and learnings from the Community Resilience Initiative, and it's out of Walla Walla, and they also have a web page there. They do have paid trainings that go on there, but also they have a lot of connections of people that have gone through their trainings and where they live, what areas they're at. And I'm going to guess that some of the people that have been through their significant trainings on trauma-informed care practices would be willing to come and help you out from your areas. So that would be an area that I would first think of, because Rick over there at the Community Resiliency Initiative, fantastic guy, does a lot of these trainings, coordinates things, goes to national trainings. yeah, he has a great past and expertise and connections. And I guess I would refer you to that web page and connecting with them and saying, hey, who lives in my area or who works in my area that might be able to come and provide, you know, my volunteers with that type of training.
Thank you. There was a question in the chat from Sherry. She teaches teacher candidates in K through 8 out in Grays Harbor, and the teacher candidates are overwhelmed by classroom management issues. And I know I teach the same group at Centralia College, and I have seen that phenomenon myself. And it seems like as difficult as it might have been before COVID, especially like in the primary grades, K through 2, it almost feels like our students have regressed, even the ones that are in the upper grades, so grades 4, 5, and above, they're regressing. And a lot of our teachers, our student teachers, our pre-service teachers who are doing student teaching in the classroom, they don't know how to handle it, and some of their mentor teachers don't know how to handle that, especially from older children who should have already had years of those procedures and, you know, in place. So I'm curious about that as well. Does anyone have any solutions to that? Or has anyone else seen that phenomenon of the regression? I know that it's happened with adults. A lot of adults seem to be regressing in their level of anxiety and not being able to handle it. And I'm just wondering how that shows up in children, and then how do teachers deal with that? Maybe that's for another panel. I don't know.
In the school districts that we work with and are connected with through the University of Washington, the single number one complaint from direct service staff is managing escalated behavior and not having the tools to deal with that. And the traditional, what we know now is the traditional quote de-escalation strategies are not effective. You know, helping direct service staff in school know what the antecedents are for escalated behavior, how to de-escalate, you know, how to anticipate power struggle behavior. Our research tells us that most escalated behavior almost always starts with a power struggle, whether the adult knows they're in a power struggle or not. So if we can teach adults to recognize power struggles and the ideology of power struggles, then most escalated behavior goes away. So they're not the tried and, it's a different way of looking at behavior management.
That's true. And I would say that maybe the way of dealing with it is the same. It's just maybe some of the causes and the traumas that they're dealing with are causing maybe reactions in the students that maybe they had been able to grow out of before, but they're kind of regressing now. I don't know if that's a good way of putting it, but we always seem to revert to our more primitive selves when we're stressed. But that's a great question, and one that I think is kind of speaks directly to the gap that we have right now in bringing up new teachers. I don't know if a lot of potential teacher candidates are avoiding the teaching profession because they just aren't prepared to deal with those types of issues along with academia, you know, teaching all the content areas as well as that whole other curriculum in social, emotional, and mental health. So that's something I think that would be really wise to address, you know, at some point. I know that OSPI has got the whole social emotional learning curriculum out there. But it would be really great if we could all kind of pull together on that. Great question, though.
So I have a comment regarding the possible reasons for regressing. I saw a video that a psychologist did where she talked about how social isolation reduces your neural connections. And so 3 years of social isolation for adults, she says, well, she wasn't talking just about adults, but she said you can, you know, usually you have enough neural connections to kind of make up for that pairing due to the social isolation. And then it occurred to me that because kids, especially, you know, these kids that basically they missed kindergarten socialization because of COVID, these fifth graders would have gone to kindergarten and instead had to stay home. And so it's like they never developed that massive amount of neural connections, and they're seeing only masked faces, and you know, so there's so much that their brains didn't get. And she said it winds up resulting in a smaller hippocampus. And so when you have a smaller hippocampus, then your depression goes up, and you're not able to get out of the depression so easily because your hippocampus is smaller than normal. And so we're needing to be able to build neural nets faster, but when they're under stress, they're not learning anything. Or the, you know, people who do mindfulness and breath work, they're like, when you're under stress, your rational part of your brain turns off and you don't remember anything that, you know, it's really hard to learn. And so I could see where that regression is, you know, you're building in a negative direction instead of a positive direction.
That is fascinating. Now I have to go out and read more about that.
I'll see if I can find, I saved the link to that video somewhere, so I'll see if I can find it and
That
drop
would
it
be
in the chat.
wonderful. Thank you, Robin. Wow. Okay. This has been fascinating. I am so excited that we got to do this and that we had some great information from our panelists, a wonderful keynote from Shelley. And I'd like to, before we end, I'd like to turn it over to Cheryl, who's got a few words to say about the Timberland Regional Library. So take it away, Cheryl.
Thank you, Lori. So I wanted to mention, when Scott was mentioning in that word resilience and adults and programs and socialization, your local public library is all of that and more. And Shelley knows that because we meet regularly with Shelley and her staff. We've met with Big Brothers Big Sisters in the past. We're working very closely with ESD 113. I've gotten to know Lee, and Lee's gotten to know more about the library and its services. And I would encourage our listeners to go to trl.org and to learn more about the 29 libraries across the 5-county region and our wonderful staff and all the wonderful programs we put on where adults could go and kids can go and be very, very safe. I also want to mention that we started mobile services this summer. Anywhere Library, and we started off in Thurston, and we just started in Mason, and we just hired for Pacific. We're still hiring for Grays Harbor and Lewis, and our hope is that in a year from now we are reaching 160 far-flung sites from our libraries to reach people who cannot make it to the library. So that's mobile services right there. And what's happening now is, as a quick example, Thurston County Chamber is coming with their coding classes and about 6 to 10 laptops, and kids in grades 2 to 5 are now taking coding classes at the place where we're going with Anywhere Library. So I wanted to mention that new service. And the second new service is expanded access hours. We have about 11 of our libraries now have, our most rural libraries have an access where you are 14 years of age and up, and you can get a key card to go into these libraries beyond the time the staff are there, from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily, including Sundays and holidays. So you can go with your bigs, right? You can go with your littles and spend time there. And so, and we hope to do more in the future. And also that if you are an adult at 20 years of age, you can bring in your minors. So you can bring in your children with you when the staff are not there. And what we've been doing with many of our libraries is bringing in interactive toys and STEM-related toys and so on and so forth for people to be able to engage in that way socially. So I just want to mention that. I thought today's panel was wonderful. You were all wonderful. We came up with great ideas for the next one in April. We hope to have it April 18th, 2024. It will be similar to this format. It'll be about an hour and a half. It'll be recorded. We'll have a keynote. And I just wanted to thank you for your time and your expertise today. This is a big lift across our region. And I just hope that the people who hear all of us today talk that we're able to move the region forward in a really caring way.
Thank you, Cheryl. And if you need to reach either of us or you have questions, just feel free to reach out. Cheryl's at chaywood@trl.org and my email's right there. We are so happy and grateful that you attended today. Want to give one last shout out to Shelley, our keynote speaker, and to all of our presenters and panelists, and to Chris for saving my skin on the recording, etc. So this has been a wonderful second Moving Forward Together event. Looking forward to many, many more. And tell your friends, tell your colleagues, let everybody know that we're doing this every approximately 6 months. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on new topics. So look for us again, Moving Forward Together 3. Take care. Have a wonderful evening.